Oh, mate, there's an idea for your YouTube channel. Maybe you can do a video of you making Christmas trinkets.
That's a fantastic idea, but they'd all end up penis-shaped.
There may be a gap in the market for that.
There's a gap in my market, if anybody's...
Hello and welcome to another episode of the JoyTuck Club, a podcast that celebrates the diversity and beauty of transgender identities and expressions. I'm Rachel, my pronouns are she, her, and with me is my wife and co-host, the beautiful Phoebe. We're also known as Red+Freckles, and are the team behind Two Damp Trans. Say hello, Phoebe.
Well, hello there. I'm also she, her.
Hi.
Hi.
Today, in a break from our gender-affirming care series, we had another Transpiration special coming in our listeners' ears. Cotton buds are not provided. Sorry. Who's the lucky subject, Phoebes?
You're going to like this one, I promise. It's an interview we did back in 2023, early in our time here at the JTC, but we didn't release it as we had to put the whole thing on hold when I was exiled from the UK.
Oh, dark days.
Yeah.
Ooh, is it a GC? I've been looking forward to bagging one of them and picking their little arguments to pieces. Who's hungry?
Well, not quite, but we do have someone who does exactly that, and she's become quite famous for it. I'm talking about none other than the Freda Wallace.
You mean the Freda Wallace who's the bane of GCs everywhere? The Freda who pissed them off by stashing a Bluetooth speaker in a skip outside their convention?
Yeah, that one. The Freda who is as articulately outspoken on trans rights as she is interesting. The Freda who knows what it is to be attacked endlessly online, and it just makes her stronger.
Ah, the Freda who will either ruffle feathers or wear them. You never know which, but is as likely to be both at once.
Yeah, that's her. She's unafraid to go on anti-trans panels and represent. She'll hit the halls of Westminster and she'll play it tough with Tufton Street, and she does it all with an absolutely wicked sense of humour.
Sounds like it's going to be another fascinating interview. I hope the GCs tune in too. They could always use more Freda.
Speaking of more Freda, make sure you jump over to YouTube where you'll find her at her newly relaunched channel, The Trans Lobby.
Yeah, that's right. The GCs always talk about a trans lobby. Now there is one.
Well, that's enough from us. Excuse the out-of-date references. Roll tape. Hi, Freda. Welcome to the JoyTuck Club podcast. It is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, yeah. And I've been looking... I've been looking at what you've been doing, and I kind of like the way you chat about things. You know, you're kind of irreverent and also very political, so...
Mixes it up.
We try and make it, because we have these conversations ourselves,
yeah,
and we just kind of record them now and try and...
That's true.
Isn't it literally like that? We have this conversation so many times recently. We've been like, oh, we should have been recording now.
Well, I do that when I'm out. Sometimes when I'm out with my friend Joe, and we'll just end up in this mad conversation, like talking, like philosophizing about. I thought, I should have recorded that. That would have been an amazing. But I do tend to keep recording equipment with me when I go out places, because I do a lot of on-the-spot interviews of people. Like when I've been to protests and turfy events, I tend to infiltrate them a little bit. And I just interview random people, and some of the best stuff is like when people, you know they're being recorded, but they don't feel like you're doing a podcast. You sort of just... So,
yeah. But originally we tried to stay away from the political stuff because that's all quite horrible and dark. But it kind of bled over, and when things were going crappy with the government,
it's hard to avoid, isn't it? Cause,
we just kind of wanted to highlight that, because we get a lot of cis listeners. Highlight what was going on, because none of them actually realise.
Yeah. I think if you're talking to people that are not down the turf right rabbit hole, you have to. It's very easy for it to sound like a conspiracy theory, because I talk about lobby groups, I talk about think tanks, and all these government bodies that campaign for the government to change laws, to stop laws going through. And if you start talking about those individuals, it can sound like this kind of crazy. Do you know when you see in a film there's a crazy wall of maths going on in someone's mind? That's how it feels, you know? Yeah. Like you have like a serial killer and you've got these connections on a wall, and it's like, that was my bedroom for about 3 months.
Did you draw all the connections going back to the US and the right?
Well, what I had to do? Well, I didn't do it physically on the wall, but on my laptop, I've got links of all certain people. If you watch certain TV stations, if you listen to certain radio, you'll notice the same people crop up a lot, especially on Talk TV and GB News and things like that. So what I managed to do is map their appearances to who they worked for, and they were always from the same 3 or 4 government Westminster think tanks, like the Policy Exchange, the IEA. New Culture Forum. So a lot of people wouldn't have heard of these. Yeah. But at the moment, Westminster is being run by these people. Like the whole of the crashing of the economy with Liz Truss came out of the IEA, the Institute of Economic Affairs. I'll talk to you about them later because that was part of my London trip. But yeah, so when you start talking about this stuff with people that are not fully aware, they go, well, I don't get it. Who's this? Who's that? And to me, it's obvious, but it can be quite frustrating.
It's what happens when you get turned into a political football.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll get to the politics later because it'd be remiss of us to have you on our podcast to not touch on politics. But first and foremost, let's talk about Freda Wallace.
So where do we start?
Well, you did you like that? That was pretty good, wasn't it? That sounded really professional.
That was a good segue, yes.
It sounded like I was going to be on trial for something.
No. So we've got a kind of a number of questions that we ask most of our guests, just to sort of their transition journey, when they knew, when they came out, and all that sort of thing. So it says on your bio that you came out in 2019, but have you always known you were trans?
Well, that's when I officially changed my name and legal documents with work and all that. But see, my transition has always been, it's been quite a long journey, really, because when I was at college and university, I pretty much transitioned. I was known as Freda then, and I was she to most people. Yeah. And it's easier when you're in an institution like a college or uni, because it's, people just tend to take, there's not that structure of work and official documentation all the time. So, but when I finished uni and I had to get a proper job and all that, I found it really difficult. And there was lots of other factors, like with my family, that made it difficult. So I sort of started to transition. Then I wouldn't say I detransitioned, but I put it on
hold. Yeah.
Because I didn't have any. I think the thing with me is I didn't have a basis of me, or like a financial backing of myself. I was still relying on my parents. I was still relying on living at home. And I felt like if I wasn't fully independent anyway. So my first goal was to become independent and live on my own. Yeah, and once I'd achieved that and had a job where I felt like I could come out, because I worked for the ambulance service. And it was only when I started working for the ambulance service that I felt like I worked for a company that had a very clear diversity and inclusion remit that was in policy. And I downloaded their transgender policy. And then I thought, well, if I was going to do it, I wouldn't be able to, because I worked in I pretty much worked for agencies where I would just work a few months for someone and then not. So it never felt like I was rooted anywhere.
Yeah.
So to have that grounding of somewhere where you feel like you're being supported, like if anything did go wrong, if you had a problem with somebody, I would have some backup. That makes all the difference. I think people sometimes diminish that because they think, well, we just be. But if you don't work for a company that has clear diversity, inclusion policy and things like that, you feel like you could be out to drift at sea a bit. So, and you hear these cases all the time, don't you, from gender critical people? Oh, well, you can't say anything anymore. It's all about pronouns now, and they're making us say things we don't want to say. And you can get sacked for calling a man a woman, and it's all nonsense, because all it is really is to say that if I was in a situation with somebody and they made it clear to me they couldn't work with me, then it doesn't make it my fault. It makes it a problem for the company, not me.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing. That's the thing that somebody like Mayor Forstarter doesn't understand. It's not individual trans people dictating how you should speak to them. It's that if you worked for a company that sided with an exclusionary stance, that would make the whole company, it would put customers, if you're going to be intolerant to one type of person, the chances are you're going to have a low tolerance for all kinds of different cultures.
Yes.
So if you're working for a public-facing company, that company doesn't want to be associated with somebody who thinks, oh God, they're going to be so snowflakey about somebody being a bit different that they can't respect them. So that's why I came out when I did, because I worked for a company that I knew did, and that was an important thing for me. I was obviously, I'd always known. I think if I think about when I first had the thought of trans or whatever, I don't think I ever thought about it like that. But I went to a school where I was taught by nuns, and there was a girls' entrance and a boys' entrance to the school. And I remember saying, I must have been about 7 years old, like, why did the girls go in that way and the boys go in? And nobody else was questioning that. I don't think any of the girls and boys had that question. And I was made to feel like a rebel. Like my first rebellion was going through the wrong door in school,
Started early.
So it was as simple as that, really, because I noticed how girls' needs were met differently. It wasn't like I felt like I was a girl. It was that I observed very clearly that girls were being treated in a different way. And it wasn't that long ago. Like I'm talking about in the 1980s. It wasn't like in the dark ages. But these teachers believed that girls did have different brains, and you had to teach girls differently. And I think that still exists to a greater or lesser degree in a lot of institutions. So like I must have been about 7 or 8 when I was having those kind of thoughts. But I didn't think...
We all start around the same age.
But I didn't think, I must be trans. But I remember seeing, when you see things on the telly and you sort of instantly gravitate towards it and you're not sure why.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing Lily Savage on the telly. And I know drag is a completely different thing to trans, but when you see something that is so fundamentally different from the heteronormative world that you live in, it's like a lighthouse beam, isn't it? It's like, and it lights everything up. And I said to my mum, I really like Lily. And that was the first thing. My mum knew I think my mum just thought I was gay for most of my teens and early adulthood. But when I said to my mum, I really love Lily Savage, because obviously that's unusual for a straight boy to say, wouldn't it? So so she didn't steer me away from it. But because I said I wanted to dress like Lily Savage, I think she thought, oh gosh, she's going to get beaten up at school. I think that was her main worry.
It started as it's the same spirit of rebellion that you still have.
Yeah.
Showing back then.
Well, you don't opt into it, do you? You're sort of forced to you get labelled as a rebel because you're noticing things that perhaps other people, and I don't know if that's something to do with the autistic spectrum as well, because you notice things that perhaps a lot of people just take for granted because they fit easily into patterns that already exist. Now, if you don't fit easily into patterns that are predetermined, you start to question them more. And in questioning, that upsets the status quo. It's not because you want to disrupt everything. It's because you can feel like you've landed from another planet and you've got to work it all out. Whereas other kids have all got it worked out because they fit into those shapes already predetermined by society. So it's like, even something as fundamental as writing, like I'm dyslexic and I found it really difficult to write. So I used to draw instead to express that. And I didn't think, I'm going to be an artist. It was just that I learned that I could express myself better pictorially.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I didn't want to learn how to write. Just because it was a little bit more difficult for me to learn how to write. Obviously, I can write and I can spell now, but because it wasn't as easily, it didn't come to me as easily as it did for other kids, then I found a workaround. So I had two skills then. I could write and I could draw.
You touched on autism because that's one of the GC talking points. It's for some reason, we were just autistic. We never had to be trans. And
well, that's
It astonishes me they don't realise it's possible to be two things at once.
I think a lot more people are on a spectrum than we realise, and it's not just a gender spectrum or an autistic spectrum. I think the two things can exist simultaneously. But when people talk about gender, I suspect there are very few people that have never questioned gender, in the sense that there are very few people in the world that have never questioned what happens when we die. It's like an existential question. It's a philosophical question. It's not. Now, a lot of those people won't do anything about it. They'll just think, oh, well, you know, how I am is how I am, and I'm fine with that. And it doesn't cause me any psychological problems. It doesn't make me feel weird. So I'm just quite happy being a boy. I'm quite happy being a man. I'm quite happy being a woman, etc. But for us, it definitely does feel wrong for whatever reason. I don't think you need an answer to that question about why. You just need to understand that it's not the only fundamental question that we ask. I was thinking about this recently because I was thinking about AI, you know, artificial intelligence. And I was thinking in terms of artificial intelligence, is that gendered? You know, is that gendered? Is it, and it possibly is, because of the way language works, not because of the way the human brain is predetermined to work. Like in terms of binary, the gender binary of male and female is not fixed, because no binary code makes sense without the dimension of the timeline. You know, it doesn't exist in a static, unmoving state. Any code or any binary doesn't exist in of itself. It has to have the element of experience or the element of evolution. So the bit that when people talk about gender, well, there's only male and female because there's an X and a Y chromosome. It's well, yes, but that's arbitrary to how that works on a timeline.
And it's also only a very, very small part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much else that happens at the same time that gets expressed in different degrees through our primary and secondary sex characteristics. There are no binaries in nature except being alive or dead. Even then, you could be halfway between.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's true. The reason I mentioned AI is because whenever they talk about robots and things like that, one of the first things that comes up is sex robots. It's always the thing that
always is.
Always sex.
And I always think, why are they always? If you watch Blade Runner, or if you watch anything to do with artificial intelligence, it's always that sexual energy that carries that idea. And I think it's always a feminine energy, or feminine. I don't mean feminine as in, you know, soft or pretty. I mean feminine as in woman. And they did this experiment where with VR, I can't remember where I saw this, I'll have to pull it up for you, but with virtual reality, where men could assemble a woman from parts, the perfect woman, and guess what? They put cocks on them. Because it was an option. It was a you know, it's like a Hoover attachment.
Hang on. The game recently released, Baldur's Gate 3, provides that option.
Yeah, I think that's
when you define your character.
That sounds familiar, actually. It might be part of the same article that I read, because if you have ultimate option, now why stop at cock? You know, you could have 5 tits or 6 cocks. It's just that we just have this idea of what is normal.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I know you're a Hitchhiker's Guide fan, so you know all about the triple-breasted whore of Eroticon 6.
It did pass through my mind just then.
Which was ripped off for Total Recall.
Total Recall, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. But you see that idea. I mean, when I first talked to you the other day, and we were talking about Douglas Adams, that's what came to my mind, because you know the computer Deep Thought.
Yeah.
Deep Thought asks the question, the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And the modern version of that is, what is a woman? Because you can keep yourselves on the gravy train for life, violently disagreeing with each other about something you don't know what the question is. And the answer might as well be 42, because if somebody could define what a woman was as a singular thing, then that removes the human element of that. Because when they use the dog whistle adult human female, the bit they're missing all the time is the human bit. And adult females, just stick to if you want to make it simple, just make it adult female. But they've got to put the human bit in. And that's the bit that is always missing from their argument.
So the issue is that, just as with Deep Thought, it's the question that's misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what is, because nobody's asking what is a man, are they, or what is a trans person? They're asking what is a woman, because when the philosophers ask what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything, they're not asking why are we here, or what is humanity, or what is the ultimate reason for our existence. It's like they've got to a point where they're asking a question they don't know they will never know the answer to, because they've got the question wrong. So
Yes.
the real question would be, what is it? What is it if you multiply 6 by 9 or something?
Yeah, right. Let's take it to 42.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was an interview with Douglas Adams about that, and he said, it doesn't make any sense, because people were trying to work it out in hexadecimal or something. But he said, no, I just made up a number, Well, people read things into stuff that's random, don't they? So
Yeah. Well, they read stuff into trans people all the time.
Mm.
So, what was it like coming out in the ambulance service? It was nice to hear that they actually had a trans policy, because when I came out in my current work, we didn't have anything, so we had to make it up as we went along. But how was that coming out in the ambulance service?
Well, for a long time, I think just people assumed I was gay, and that's fine, but it's very male dominated, or at least the base I was at was, and it's like there's a lot of locker room kind of stuff, and I found that quite uncomfortable. So I thought, when I come out, my main worry that is these men might feel I've betrayed them, because men talk to each other differently than they talk to women when they're in the company of men, especially straight men. Even if they know you're gay, they'll tell you all things about they're having an affair with somebody, or they'll talk about their partners in a very misogynistic way. So I was thinking, Christ, how can I have because I really liked them, I got on with them. We went for pints and stuff, and and I thought, how are they going to relate to me now? Because the way they think about women, would they be misogynistic towards me? I didn't. That was my main worry. The way I did it was I booked like 3 weeks off work.
Yeah.
And on the first week, I contacted my manager and I said, I've got something I want to tell you. And this was like the most scary conversation I've had in my life, even worse than my mum, really, and my dad, because they kind of knew me growing up. So it wasn't like a massive shock, because I'd always been a bit of a drag queen. But I used to live for the weekend, so I'd go out on the weekend and my dad would be like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Like because I didn't dress in stereotypically. I dressed in a quite an extreme way. I was a goth that was into like cyber punk and stuff like that. So nice. I never went out looking normal. Do you know what I mean? So my mum, it was no shock to mum. It was more of a relief, because you're going to start dressing more like a lady now. I can take you to church on Sunday. But anyway, no. So when I had this conversation with my manager, she said, have you been to the doctor? Because she's very pragmatic. She just said, right, I need to know how to manage this as a manager. She was emotional support as well, but her point was, I need to get this right because I don't want to get sacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I never would have done that. I know I'm not that kind of person, but she said, she was very clear with me. She said, you have to help me here. You have to go to the doctor, and I think I need some kind of proof of your new identity. If you're going to change your name and you're going to change your pronouns and all that, we need to put it in writing, and we need to... So, yeah, she taught me through it, and we did all that. And that was it. And I thought, when I put the phone down, I thought I built that up. I'd been thinking about that conversation for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was over in about 5 minutes. And I put the phone down. And it felt like, I don't know, the way I described it to my mum was, I felt like I'd been underwater for about 3 or 4 years. And suddenly there was this new air to breathe.
Yeah.
And I went out and I got my new uniform. And it wasn't like my personality, nothing changed about me in any innate way, but just that ability to have people call me with the name I wanted and call me she. And it's such a small thing, isn't it? it's such a tiny change for cis people or people who are not trans or whatever. But for a trans person, it changes the whole world.
Yeah. I know. When I came out, some cis guy said to me, "He's like, oh, it's not like you're a different person." He says, "You're still the same person." I said, "Well, I am, and I'm not. I'm me 2.0 because the old me was being suppressed. No, the real me was being suppressed, and now I'm unleashed."
Well, yeah.
So my confidence just went through the roof, and I was literally a completely different person. But sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say so. That's true about confidence, because when I was working, I mean, I got on with the job. I did I was pretty good at it, but I wasn't as confident as some of the other employees because I don't know, for whatever reason, I felt sort of debilitated by this thing in the back of my head. So once that had gone, everybody noticed how happy I was, more smiley, I was more quick on my feet. It was like you said, that kind of upgrade thing.
Yeah.
And then when I had a review with my manager, because my manager was really worried about people maybe making comments, and to be honest, the whole first year, there was only one incident with one man I used to work with who refused to talk to me because he said, "I just can't accept it." And I said, "Well, you know what? I really respect you for saying that, because that could have come out in a negative way." But he actually said, "Look, I just can't accept it." And I said, "Well, do you know what? I'm not going to make you accept. I'm not here to force you to accept anything."
No.
And then a few days later, he came back to me and he said he wanted to take me on a date.
That's quite a U-turn.
And he said, I said, "Would you?" And I said, "No, sorry, man." I felt like, oh my God, I've confused him, then dumped him. But that was the thing that was in his head. He couldn't. That was the knot in his head that he suddenly.
He couldn't accept how he was feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
And I did have some sexual harassment actually because I think when you're trans, you sort of become a bit like public property. So like when I was on the hormones and people started noticing my body changing, people asked me, "Oh, are you going to get a boob job? Are you going to get the..." And then somebody actually asked me, "Do you stand up to we?" And I was like, well, sometimes, if you have to be quick. I've still got the point and shoot feature, do you know what I mean? But people ask you things like that they would never ask of a cis woman, or,
Yeah.
And but the thing is, for me, I'm quite open anyway, and I kind of diffuse it with humour. But my manager said to me, "Look, she brought me in the office and she said, we've got a load of new starters starting this year. And I want you to go be with one of the new starters." And I said, "Why me?" And she said, "Well, I've got the feeling that they can get on with you okay. Because if somebody's got a problem or it's a bit like a test of tolerance. Like, if somebody's fine with me, they're probably going to be fine with anyone. Not because I'm a difficult person to get on with, but because of the trans thing. If somebody had a problem with that, they probably have a problem with other stuff." And it's like so I was with like new starters, but I quite like that but I was always upfront about it because I always got the impression that people gossip anyway. Because I'd always, if I was working with somebody for the first time, I go, "So what do you know about me then?" And they'd mention everything apart from the trans bit.
Oh.
But I thought, you know what you want to talk about, but you can if you want. But I always describe things like if somebody asked me, "How did I know I was trans?" or "How does it feel?" I always say, well, your body is like your hardware, isn't it? You whatever you're born with, that's the hardware. You can change it, but your gender is like the software, and people just communicate with the program you're running, and that is, you don't need to go any deeper than that, and that can be upgraded, So because I think we all. This is another point I always make is it's not just trans people that transition. Not everybody transitions.
Yeah.
Psychologically, through trauma, through bereavement, through breakup, through anything like that. We all transition. It's like the whole body is a kind of muscle that is constantly breaking and reforming.
Or just by getting old, people are transitioning. You're not the same as the person you were when you were 21. When you're 40, you've transitioned.
It's a very literal thing, though, if you say trans, isn't it? So, yeah, I think like most people can relate to the experience if you talk about it like that. You know, I think a lot of people, because of the way the British media is at the moment, because I remember being in the office at work and somebody brought a copy of the Daily Mail in and puts it on the table. And the front page story is about, you know, Isla Bryson.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in my face. That's on the table at work, right? I'm the only trans person in that room, and there's a story about a trans rapist. That's what they're leading with. Yeah. So automatically I feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Now, So somebody wants to have a conversation about that with me because I'm trans, but really it's got nothing to do. You know what I mean? The trans part of it, being trans is not the driver of anything, is it? It's not the cause or effect of anything.
Shouldn't be.
So why do I have to have opinions on these things just because it's like, I was at the hospital in Manchester Royal Infirmary, once, and there's a massive TV screen, you know, like they have like in train stations.
Yep. And
they had the BBC News on. It's massive. It must be like a cinema screen, this thing. Mm-hmm. There was this story about a trans sports person, and this was like massive on the wall. I thought, am I suddenly supposed to have an opinion on this now? You know what I mean? Because people are talking about it, and the main focus word is the word trans.
Well, you are a cis person's trans Wikipedia.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, right.
That's what they think.
You have to answer every question.
Yeah. You're surrounded by all this information all the time that cis people are getting about trans issues. So the problem is, even though these are issues that do need to be talked about, you know, if you are in sports, if you are in, you know, in a situation where there is safeguarding or there is some kind of balance to be made about parity and fairness or whatever. But I'm sure those are arguments that could be had, but they enter our world not through a concern for safety or parity or fairness. They come from a sense that trans people are now a problem that needs to be solved. Mm. And that's the issue, you know, because I don't think for 1 minute that the Daily Mail's suddenly concerned about the welfare of women in prisons. Like, since when did they give a toss about that? Mm. And when have they ever cared about when have Tories cared about fairness in anything? Never mind sport, you know what I mean? So,
well, the thing is, we've always existed. It's just that now people are more aware of us.
I think it's it's this thing of a lot of people that would not have heard about us or not cared are now finding us in their Twitter streams. And what tends to happen, it's quite easy to weaponize imagery, isn't it? To find threatening looking, you know, evil trans people and then make that the leading, you know, make that the thing. And then people, you know, because you'll see these, you know, these things they post from Pride events where they'll show like sort of semi-naked men dancing and then some children and the inference is that they're groomers. Mm. And you see that all the time now. So somebody that's not used to seeing this stuff, who's probably, you know, quite sensitive and is quite prudish, when you start commenting in this, if it shows you more of that stuff, that's how the algorithm works. So you know, somebody that isn't necessarily interested in drag or trans or gay stuff or whatever it is, they start making angry comments and going, oh, why are you showing me this? Or look at all this groomers. So as soon as they start engaging in that negative feedback loop, they get shown more of it, and then all of a sudden they think this is taking over their lives, and it's not. It's just a very, very narrow bandwidth, so intense that it's not showing them anything else. Yeah. When they're probably just some bloke from Bolton who just likes going fishing normally. It's not showing him fishing anymore. It's showing him drag queens twerking.
Yeah, that is.
Well, you found out, didn't you, Phoebe? So you were. You've been engaging with GCs on Twitter, and now your suggested posts are all from GCs.
Yeah, Yeah, it's like, oh goodness, there's another one and another one and another one. How do you cope, Freda, with the very negative comments you get back?
Well, the thing is with me, I'm when it first started happening, it's quite shocking because, you know, some really nasty people on. I mean, Twitter now, it's like this kind of free speech. Well, they say it's not really free speech. It's just kind of free ranting. It's very hard for people to report anything, so it's getting worse. But when I first started doing that, because when I first came out and I started putting pictures of myself on, I thought, oh, why are people taking the piss out of me? Because they don't, I'm like as if I'm some kind of famous person, like, oh, look at this one. You know, people will screenshot you and then point out things where you don't look good and all this. Why would somebody do that?
Yeah.
So it is weird at first, but then, because I was going on TV and I was doing radio interviews, I made a note of a lot of the negative things that was happening in the comments section. And I made a lot of my blog about that because I noticed that when somebody retweets you or reposts whatever, some of those accounts doing that are very big accounts. They're like people that have like hundreds of thousands of followers. And that's how a pile-on happens. Now, I was monitoring that and looking at who was doing it. So I kind of went in for it. I kind of made that what I would talk about because I was on the, was it James Whale show on Talk TV. And I actually said to him, because he was talking about online hate crimes, and in his attitude was, oh, well, just ignore it. You know, these people, they're all lunatics anyway. And I said, well, James, when we finish this interview, and this goes out onto Twitter as a video, will you look at the comments and tell me how you feel about that? Because they're not criticising what I say. They're criticising how I look. And there's no...
Yeah.
And that was part of what I was doing. So it kind of escalated really badly with me because I was... you know Graham Linehan?
Yes.
Yeah, he really came for me because I was...
Did he?
Yeah. I mean, it's not really a long story. It's just him retweeting me and then getting people to try, because what their aim is to silence me and push me off social media.
Yeah.
They want you to bully. If they think you've got a voice in the media or you are able to have a conversation with people and maybe communicate, they want to shut that down.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm the best at debating or the best at arguing. I'm just saying I'm just confident enough to put myself in those spaces and not be self-conscious. And they want to make me self-conscious. They want to frighten me away from doing that, and that is their aim. So it didn't stop me; it just made me worse.
Well, so I remember this when it happened. I think it was one of the prominent GCs took an upskirt photo of you.
Oh,
that on Twitter.
No, well, what happened there was I was invited by Peter Tatchell and a guy called Mark Glendenning. Mark Glendenning works for the IEA, and he'd written a document called Gender Ideology, and it was basically to lobby the government on the anti, you know, because of self-ID and all that, they want to suppress that. So he'd written this document, but I read this document, and it was all just like Telegraph, Daily Mail, talking points. It wasn't researched. It wasn't like any kind of like academic document. It was just a compilation of bullshit, basically. So I wrote to him and I said, this thing you've written, can I just point out to you where you're going wrong here? Because if you want to, you know, because obviously gender ideology is a conspiracy theory that comes out of the American kind of Christo-fascist kind of areas. You know, it started off as LGBT ideology, and then earlier than that, it was called the gay agenda and stuff like that. So
that's right.
You can plot the evolution up. So I explained this to him, and he's not bothered because all he's paid, because all the Institute of Economic Affairs getting involved in something like this seems very odd to me. Because what's it got to do with, you know, economics or what we call neoliberalism, which is what they stand for? It seemed to be a bit of a diversion. So I sent this out to him, and he said, well, would you be interested in coming to London and being part of a debate? Because Peter Tatchell was asking if somebody would accompany him because he knew what the debate was going to be about, and he said that a trans person should be able to talk to this subject, not be talked about. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is with the people they invite, they were all the LGBT Alliance people. And Sex Matters and Maya Forstater. When I was doing this debate, Maya Forstater was in the front row, and I wore quite a short dress and fishnet ties, and I didn't bank on how short this dress was till I sat down, honestly. But it wasn't. Anyway, so I sat down, I crossed my legs, and I thought I cannot uncross my legs now because the way that the stage was, and Maya Forstater's eye shot. I thought, have I uncrossed my legs now? So anyway, it was really self-conscious. But she took this picture. Now, what happened then was she put it onto her Twitter feed, and then her followers zoomed in on it. It wasn't Maya that did that, but she saw this happen and she didn't do anything about it. Right. And then subsequent to that, they made a load of cartoons of me and really dehumanizing stuff. And because of the rule of Chinese whispers, by the time this got to a few threads down, it was me with my testicles out, and that's how they drew it. So that's so what I'm saying is the reason I did that debate is because I didn't go there to debate then. I did not go there to do that. I'm not having a debate with Helen Joyce. I'm not about gender ideology. That isn't going to happen. I'm just there to represent, because the debate was gender ideology is a threat to liberal values, right? But I'm the liberal value. Yeah. I'm the liberal voice in that, because what I do is I go in there and I say, I actually literally said in that, I don't know if you've seen the debate or watched it, but I don't answer any of the questions. I don't answer to anything in that debate. The main point I'm making is that the men that chat me up and come on to me in private are the men that follow Helen Joyce in public. Yeah. And that is the point I'm making about that whole thing. So I kind of orchestrated it in a way that it would be like a witch trial. They're the Puritans. And you'll notice that as Helen Joyce goes on, she gets kind of not nervous, but she recognizes that I'm not there to have that debate. And the audience understands that as well, because they're all LGBT Alliance people who were down there for the LGBT Alliance conference, and they clap loudly what Helen says. Why are they clapping loudly? Because they're all the same. They don't need to clap her. They're her friends. They're doing it because they want to give that impression that Helen is winning something. And she's not. She's just expressing it. All Helen Joyce's arguments are a repertoire. They're not. She's not having original thoughts as she's talking to the debate or talking to what I say. She completely ignores everything I say anyway. And it was really frustrating for me because I kept nudging the mediator to say, "Can I say the debate is about trans?" Yeah. And I'm treated in that debate like I'm just one other voice, but actually the debate is about me. Yes. So I'm nudging the mediator to say, I can say it, and he doesn't let me speak because he doesn't understand the debate. He doesn't understand the dynamic. And I had a bit of a fallout with Peter Tatchell as well, because Peter Tatchell has a kind of trans-medical view, and he believes that men and women have different brains or something. He didn't say that explicitly, but that's the crux of what he was trying to argue. And I said, no, Peter, I'm not here to argue that. And I got out a letter that my employer got a letter from the LGBT Alliance because I wrote a poem called, you ready for this? I wrote a poem called Transgender Lesbian Sperm Producing Female.
One of my favourites.
And I put it on Twitter, and LGBT Alliance discovered that I work for the ambulance service. And they wrote to my HR department and said, why is somebody... Because I had gone in quite hard for the LGBT Alliance. I will admit on Twitter, I had called them out many times. So they said I was harassing them on Twitter. And they, because they have the letterhead, we're a charity, we're a registered charity, as if, as if that carries any weight. Yeah. But I had a phone call from my manager and said, who are these people that they say that you can't call yourself a lesbian, and they say that you're harassing them. So I explained to them who they were. And that was back in September last year. anyway, nothing happened. Obviously, there was no case to answer in terms of me, because I'd never had a disciplinary before, and I'd never done anything wrong before. And I explained to them who the LGBT Alliance were. And then it escalated to a group called Fair Cop, which is Harry Miller and Sarah Fillmore. Now, I have written loads about those. I won't go into too much detail because, like I said, it gets a bit into conspiracy theory territory. But what they do is they'll find instances where the police are doing something for pride, or they'll do something and then they'll cause a pile-on local police inclusion accounts and make their lives impossible. And I know there's a couple of police officers I've spoken to that have come forward to me to talk about it, and they can't do anything because if you're in the police, you're not in a union. They're in a hard place there, because if they speak out about it, it becomes political, and the police are not allowed to be political in that sense. No. Whereas I don't give a toss. I was straight in there. And because I did that, they tried to get me. So they were getting these endless letters to work about, I shouldn't be working for the ambulance service because I call people dickheads on Twitter. If you're a public-facing employee, if you're in uniform, an employee like the ambulance service sees your social media conduct in the same way it would publicly. They don't think about who is attacking me. This is why I don't work for the ambulance service now, because it became untenable. Because what happened with, I did mention Graham Linehan. There's an account called Henrietta Freeman, who was a disabled campaigner, but she was saying that she couldn't get same-sex care. But it was very obvious she was using this as a transphobic polemic. And I explained to her, you can get same-sex care. It doesn't matter if you live on your own and somebody comes to see you and they touch you without your permission, that's abuse. You can discriminate in any way you like. And I explained to her, and because of this argument I had with this disabled person, it just totally escalated. And Graham Linehan was saying that I was abusing a disabled girl on the internet and all this. And then what they did was somebody went rooting around in my past and into my Instagram and found pictures of me from a fetish club and decided to publish this. See, I'm not bothered. I've got those pictures of me all over the place. I'm very open about my sexuality. Because I was in a very queer scene in Manchester for a long time as a gay man. So it was all pretty open and liberal. But because they were putting these pictures together, like a picture of me in sort of a fetish club next to me in uniform and posting that on Twitter, they were making me a target. Yeah. Because I'm a public-facing employee. So I just went in for this, and I thought, I'm not going to let this happen. I had a choice. I could have deleted my Twitter. I could have shied away, but I didn't. I went the opposite way.
Yeah. And
because I did that, I couldn't stay working with the ambulance service because they won't support me. It's not that they sack me. It's just that I knew that they're never going to stop complaining about me. No, I had a choice. I could stop going into the media. I could stop going on Talk TV. This was what work said. He said, you can't, it's like you've got two jobs. It's like you're volunteering for the LGBT Foundation. You're doing all that media, but you're also working for the ambulance service. But the two things are incongruent. And that's what we agreed, that I didn't want to get a disciplinary because I didn't want to leave a job with that. So I decided to resign and just do my media stuff, and I do other things. But that was really stressful because they made me a target, but I wasn't willing to shy away.
No, you didn't play their game.
No, I played my game, and exposed who they are. Because one of the big turning points was me going on Talk TV with Rosanna Lockwood. That's Piers Morgan's show, and she was standing in for Piers Morgan. And I'd written to her, and I'd said, because she'd had some guests that were GC, gender critical, I explained to her the work I was doing, and she listened to me because she's a proper journalist. She's one of the few proper journalists on that station. Yeah. And I told her about Graham Linehan and what happened. And she listened, and she said, well, because I wrote an article for the Talk TV website about it that really pissed them off. And then when Graham Linehan went on her show, she was already armed with all that information. So she didn't give him any quarter. She went in for him. And that's the meltdown he had on. I don't know if you've seen the Talk TV interview.
I think I have seen that, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's because of the information that I didn't just give it to her. She's a journalist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? But because I write to people all the time. That's how I get where I am in the media. It's not because I want to be a voice in the media. It's because I write to people and I say, you fucked up there. You got that wrong. And this is why you're wrong. And I make a nuisance of myself, and they'll say, well, why don't you come on and talk about it? And I'll say, go on then. And that's it. And then that's why I've been able to do it. But, that interview with Graham Linehan, that was where he totally exposed himself as the abuser that he is, Mm. And he's still there. He's still he's still on Twitter. He's still not held to account. Mm. And it makes you wonder why we're protecting him, because he still gets invited to do these free speech events.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You mean the ones with half a dozen people standing in the rain?
Yes. Yeah. Well, when I was in London, I went to... obviously, I did the debate at the IEA, which wasn't a debate. And then I went to what's called it's called Battle of Ideas. This is Claire Fox's Academy of Ideas, which is like a bit of a think tank, but they're all right-wing, anti-trans, climate deniers. And
it's all the same cloth in the end.
It's all the same people. And everybody, the GC movement is the key players are very few people, and they were all in the same room. They all fit around this same little hub in Westminster. So, and I went there, and I went to, what I did is it's at Church House, which is in Westminster, and I set up a Bluetooth speaker on my phone, and it was just a message that repeated, and it said, the LGB Alliance are a far-right hate group. And it just repeated and repeated, and it was really loud, and I just left it there.
You just left the speaker open, like
I just left it, and it was in the grounds of Church House, which is like a little park, and then the main debate rooms are inside. So it was just outside there in a skip.
In a skip?
Yeah. So they have to find it. They'll have to climb in the skip.
Nice.
And I did the same thing at Kelly J. I was at, Kelly J. Keane, Posey Parker's.
Posey Parker, yeah.
Yeah, get together. It was the same people there as well.
Yeah, there was.
Apart from Kelly's angers on, who threatened my friend and hit her with an umbrella. But I played a Bluetooth speaker there that had... Sarah Jane Baker's, Sarah Jane Baker? Mm. She was in prison for a long time. She was sent back to prison. Mm-hmm. She was sent back to prison for saying on Trafalgar Square, if you see a
turf,
punch them in the fucking face. Now, that is not a good idea if you're out on parole for the rest of your life. So, but she did say that, and she doesn't regret it. And I took that recording of Sarah Jane Baker and played it to them on repeat. That was my little protest, because they can't do anything about that to me. It's a recording. It's anyway, the police did come though, but the police don't have a clue, do they? What's going on? The police actually think, because the way that they get away with what they do, they'll say they're a women's rights organisation, or they'll say they're standing for women, or it's something to do with feminism. Because the police just look at that and go, oh, yeah, whatever. Because they don't look beyond that layer. Well, that's the way they've been able to get away with it, because they can say they're doing something for LGBT rights, which they're obviously not, which we can easily prove that. And they're obviously not doing anything. They're not feminists, because the subject matter they're interested in, real feminists are not. I don't have time for that. I follow people like, have you had a Sister Space and Patsy Stevenson, who was challenging police misogyny? No, those are real feminists who you sometimes see in the media, but not often.
Well, they're not exclusionary.
I think the reason the TERF movement has has had a lot of inroads into the media is because they are the feminists the patriarchy prefers, because they don't challenge anything about systems of power. There was no criticism for Andrew Tate from those people. There was no criticism for Russell Brand. There was no criticism for any of these media misogynists. I mean, there was a case, I can't remember his name now, but when it was the FIFA, was it the Ladies World Cup? There was
the Spanish president.
Yeah, and he forced a kiss on one of the players, and this guy was on Talk TV being rehabilitated as some kind of, like, Piers Morgan was trying, like he does with all these people, just wants his side of the story, but there's no story for those women that were affected by it. And these are the platforms that put Kelly J. Keane on and Helen Joyce. There's no feminism from them. They're very single issue anyway.
So what's next for you in amplifying your counter messages?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm going to start my YouTube channel again. But the plan is that what I want to do is, like, make little documentaries, because I've got so many recordings of people talking at events. And I wanted to put it together in some kind of narrative. So because I really like radio documentaries, you know, where they just go on a little bit of a fact-finding mission and interview people. And then there's like a, you know, so it's like a story you can listen to. So I'm thinking of doing something like that. I want to do more stuff on TV. If something comes up and I'm interested in doing it, I probably will try and do it. But I'm doing more work with the LGBT Foundation in Manchester. So I like doing things that are on the ground, really. Like, you know, because when I started with the LGBT Foundation, it was to do with recovery, you know, drug and alcohol issues. Yeah. So, you know, you meet a lot of interesting people doing that. So.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions that we ask all of our guests, actually, when they come on. And the first one is, do you have any regrets from transitioning?
No. The only regret is I didn't do it sooner.
It's a common one, yeah.
Mm.
And the other one is the cis button. Are you familiar with this? This was doing the rounds a little while ago on Twitter. No. If there was a button in front of you that you could press that would turn you cis.
Oh, no.
No.
How boring would that be?
Exactly.
See, increasingly, I think of myself more because in these arguments about male and female and stuff like that, I think I don't really care. You know, I mean, it's you know, as long as people are polite. You know, when I go out and I'm in the pub or whatever, and people are just generally not horrible. But it's like on Twitter and stuff. It's like, well, you're a man or a woman, or you'll notice that they always. If you wanted to get affirmed as a man, like say if you were an insecure man and it's like, be trans, because that'll be the only time anybody comes up to you and says, you're a man. Nobody says that to men. Nobody says that to men because they want you to be what they want you to be. Right. But I'm not interested really. I'm like, you know, if you want to, because a lot of people, they just call me Fred and I don't even notice, you know, I just reply to them because it doesn't really register with me. But I know why they're doing it, because they're trying to assert some kind of authority over my identity. But it just all that does to me is show me an insecurity in them. Because if you have to make a profile which is solely about doing that to people, about asserting that, you know, being against trans people, then that says nothing about trans people. It says an awful lot about somebody that's willing to spend the time creating a whole social media personality around one issue.
Yeah.
And they know they can get some, I know it's algorithmically rewarding for some people to do that, to be single issue and to be, you know, because I'm all over the place with the stuff I post, you know. I mean, obviously I do post a lot of trans politics because that's what I write about, but you know, I'm all quite random with it because we're not one-dimensional people, are we, you know?
No. But touching on the politics, I know we're probably a bit short on time to actually go into this. Right. But, you know, there's been a lot recently, anti-trans stuff coming out of Westminster.
Yeah.
What would you say to trans people out there that are worried about all of this noise that's coming out?
See, on one level, I think if you didn't read about it, if you didn't know about it, if you just got on with, what you want to do and your social life, you would probably never notice. And that is one way I would look at it. The other thing is, there are people out there that do want to repeal laws that protect us. Mm-hmm. And that's what it comes down to. It can feel like everybody is against us, but they're not really. It's a very specific group of people that want to influence law so the law says what they want it to say. And they're very few people, but they have a lot of power. And then there's all these hangers on, the regular Joes that are just making a lot of noise on Twitter. But it's like with any social change, it can feel like the mountain is huge to climb, but it only takes one action really for everything to change. It's like when they decriminalized homosexuality in the 60s. If they'd have done that by referendum, it wouldn't have happened because most people were against it. They just knew it was the right thing to do. They just knew that the way the trajectory of human progress, the arc of history, prefers freedom. And that's always the way. You may have a blip somewhere along the way where, this left and right. Sometimes left wins, sometimes right wins. We're all in this kind of equilibrium of, you've got your extreme socialist left and then your extreme conservative right. But we're never side will win, but we'll on a seesaw sometimes lean one way and sometimes it will work out for us and other times it won't. But on a longer timeline, these are blips, and unfortunately sometimes we have to go through quite extreme change. I think with what's happened with Brexit, what's happened with COVID, and if you look at America, it's so scary that Trump may get re-elected. Sometimes things have to implode for a new thing to form. I'm really concerned at the moment. See, in the bigger picture, trans stuff is not really. I mean, it's important to us, obviously, but for the most of the general public, it isn't. No. Their opinions are lazy, not because they don't care. It's because it just doesn't register with them. Now, if you're a friend with a trans person, or like my mum, I'm pretty sure my mum reads the Daily Mail every day.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I wasn't trans, she would have a very similar opinion of trans people that most other casually reading the Daily Mail people might have. Like she does about immigrants, and I have to correct her all the time. I say, Mom, they're not coming over here to steal your jam. Don't worry. Do you know what I mean? It's like this constant fear narrative, isn't it? So most people don't know because they don't care enough. It's not because they don't care about us personally. It's just because it might feel like everybody's against us and nobody understands the issue, and you're like banging your head against a brick wall. But it's not because they don't care. It's not because they're not empathetic. It's just because they've got something else. They've got bigger fucking fish to fry. And at the moment with this whole Israeli-Palestine, I mean, the way that's being weaponized in this country, I'm really scared at the moment because I live in Bolton, which is quite a large Muslim population. And the racism from some of the white parts of this town, it's like they are congregating around parties that are very fascistic. And that's where, you've heard of Reform and Richard Tice and all those people. They'll look at those people as some kind of answer to something. And that's really worrying. That's because of Brexit. But
yeah.
So that is more important at the moment than the trans debate. But on a personal level, like obviously the trans debate is something that I write about because I see I've got a front row seat, haven't I? So
yeah.
But I do always say to people, and I do sign off a lot of my things with, if when trans people warn you, believe them.
Yes.
Because it's incremental. You know, there are people on Twitter, you know, these LGB without the T and gays against groomers people. They think they're distancing themselves from trans rights activists and all that because they think that's going to protect them. They think that if they think they're going to side with the right because they're frightened on an incremental scale, that, you know, it will be trans people that come to protect them eventually.
Yeah.
Like it was at Stonewall, you know.
Yeah.
The reason trans people were the first to be affected, and, you know, who acted the Stonewall riots was because they were visible. You know, people can be gay and never come out and never. If you're a street queen, if you're a Puerto Rican drag queen on the streets of New York and the police are coming for you, they know exactly where to look. Yeah. My understanding of Stonewall, the original Stonewall riots, it wasn't one day, it was a whole week, almost a month of uprising. It was just, it culminated in fires and that. And I can see that happening again, you know. I can see, because even though people assume that we made massive advances in gay rights and liberation, because of the trans thing, we recognise that actually there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's very fragile. One thing I noticed was there was a lot of pushback against Pride in general this year. I think it's because a lot of people are like, I can get away with saying what I like about trans people, so let's say what we like about all LGBT people. Because we can get away with one. So it's a very fragile existence. They accepted the gays, but have they really?
Well, it's about when people feel emboldened to make, because obviously online, we notice it more online.
Yeah.
Like when I was at Manchester Pride this year, the only people protesting were the usual religious people who stand on the side telling we're all going to burn in hell, and we all dance around them and take the mic, and that's it. But online, it's very different because, like, what I was going to say, you know what I was saying about when they decriminalised homosexuality? There was a lot of people that just had casually homophobic views and would express them in the papers and stuff. But because it was decriminalised, and then people were more visible as gay, and you saw, you know, people on TV, and it was more normalised, the average Joe in the street just thought, there's no point going on about this now. You know, it wasn't like they had this massive epiphany where they thought, I was wrong all this time. It was just, I just can't, you know, what's the point? You know, just let live and let live. Because most people's level of tolerance is, you know, it's not like they're full of anger and energized by hate. It's just that they're just emboldened to have lazy opinions and they're not challenged on them.
Well, you said most people don't care, and you're right, because I think they did a poll and only 1% of voters thinks that the trans issues are going to matter in the next UK general election. But you have to ask the question, if that's true, then why are the Tories so hell-bent on demonising us?
It's probably the same. I was going to say, it's probably the same reason the Rwanda plan is such a big thing in the news, because these kind of big news stories, like, it's a media game, isn't it? It's not really a politics game. It's about controlling what goes on the cover of the Daily Mail. And
I think they can't fix any of the problems that people actually care about. So they make up a problem that they think they can fix.
Yeah,
right.
And then say, so they get the public to think that we're a problem, and then they're going to sort us out.
It just depends.
Rather than sorting out electricity bills and all of the other stuff boring, that people actually care about.
I was having this conversation because have you heard of Mick Lynch, the union guy?
Yes.
He should be a prime minister, because I was saying, because someone said, why would he necessarily understand trans issues? And I said, well, you don't have to understand trans issues. You just have to do a fucking risk assessment. And he's that kind of guy. He'd go, well, where's the threat? What's the numbers? You know, because, you know, when you see these debates about single-sex spaces and things like that, every so often I'll go. There's one of the the lady that does the show with Graham Linehan and Helen Stanyland.
Yes.
She constantly goes on about single-sex space toilets and stuff. And I make a point of going on her feed once every 6 months. And I say, 6 months now since you last spoke about this. Do you know how many assaults or rapes happened in public toilets? And she won't be able to tell me, but I can tell her exactly how many happened at music festivals, at bars, in public places. It didn't make any difference to whether it was a cubicle or a private space, because the way that safeguarding works for those would never stop an abuser going in if they wanted to.
No.
So it's this constant nonsense. So if you had somebody like Mick Lynch, you'd go, what's the risk assessment? Why are we wasting time talking about this? Shouldn't we be talking about, like, educating men and boys that they shouldn't feel entitled to go up to women in bars and touch them?
Yeah.
You know, he might say something like that. I'd like to think so.
So what do you think is the risk to another run around the edge of the ECHR like they did with the Rwanda plan regarding biological sex?
Well, they did. The bigger plan of Brexit was to get rid of these kind of institutions because they call them lefty lawyers. You know, they are the enemy of the, what would you call it, the ultra-conservatives. With the corruption, like, was it Baroness Faulkner?
Yeah.
She's basically bought and paid for. Just whenever I've seen her speaking, I feel like she's either willfully ignorant or she's just evil. And I just can't work it out. I mean, the public probably don't understand the function of things like the EHRC, and they probably would. It is quite easy to say, "Oh yeah, they're the bad people. The people that care about your human rights are now the bad people because they're the people stopping us sorting out the Rwanda problem." Well, there is no Rwanda problem. You invented that problem. Yeah. There isn't even an immigration problem, to be honest. I mean, I don't really want to have an argument about that, but in terms of the great scheme of things, illegal immigration, you can't do much about. You know, it's going to happen. You know, we have to manage it. And the best thing you can do is stop people drowning.
Yeah.
The EHRC isn't going to stop. You know? But they want to get rid of these institutions because they see them as in the way of because like that's the idea of British sovereignty. That's why the Scottish self-ID bill was important, because Scotland wants independence.
Yeah.
It's actually Scotland that's transitioning. She's been on the hormones and she wants to be herself and come out and, you know. But they don't want that. They want to keep her in the closet. They want to keep her in Westminster. And the idea of self-determination is not just a personal one, is it? It's a national idea. It's like our identity is also, it's not just internal, it's about our identity as a citizen. And I think that's breaking down, you know, like, because less and less we feel rooted to state and country as individuals and more to ourselves as a sovereign individual, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But but back to the question of changing the definition to biological sex. I mean, you were saying earlier that most of the trans issues don't affect us in the real world. Right? I very happily go around my day. I've happened to have been in France for the last 5 weeks, not misgendered once. Yeah. And, you know, because it's not difficult. It's not really something people really want to do, except online. But if they do that and single-sex spaces become a thing, for me, I can't risk breaking the law in the UK by stopping. Well,
yeah, I know what you're saying, but it's impossible to enforce because there are many cis women that wouldn't pass that purity test of looking or being feminine enough, and people can be vindictive, and you would find that if there was such a law where a member of the public or some official in a public place could stop me from entering a public lavatory and then call the police, then people would use that not to protect women, but to harm others, that there would be no benefit to it.
Yeah.
I know trans women now that are frightened of going out they're frightened of going somewhere where they might need to use a public toilet. And they said to me, I won't mention any names, but have said, I use the disabled because I feel like I shouldn't be in the female space. Now, that wouldn't have happened a few years ago because those spaces don't exist to delineate on that. In Manchester, where I go out, a lot of places now in the Northern Quarter, they have gender neutral. The restaurants, there's not enough space. They'll just have one cubicle that's also a disabled space, and that's it. So it's not really an issue for most people. And obviously, like I've been out in Manchester clubbing, and and if you've ever seen a group of women on a night out when they're completely plastered and they're all over the place, and I'm thinking, the men are scared of the women coming into their spaces. You know what I mean? Because that happens, and I sometimes when I've been caught short, and there's been a massive queue. I remember being at a theatre once in Manchester, and there was a massive queue for the ladies. I thought, I'm just going to sneak in the men's. But you see, when I did that, because there's the problem with that is men piss standing up at a latrine.
Yeah.
And they don't want to see me when they've got the dicks out, do they? Well, they might, but it's much more uncomfortable for them than it would be for me.
Yeah, they become very self-conscious.
Because those spaces don't exist to prevent any kind of nefarious sexual interaction. They're just purely for modesty and politeness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I went to a gay bar in Leeds with a group of cis men. They didn't realise it was a gay bar. It was one of the most funniest nights I've ever been on. I went to the toilet, and they were gender-neutral toilets, but literally like a whole row of cubicles. And there were men in there, there were women in there, non-binary people, whoever, and people just hanging around in there like they do at clubs.
Yeah.
And I came back and I watched them, and the first one of the cis guys that went to the toilet, they came back, they looked like they had PTSD. It was a problem for them. Yeah, they just weren't comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And it was great, yeah.
The way that it's spoken about online is, you've got to stay out of our spaces. But when people say that, they're talking about their mental space. They don't want trans women in their space, as in their reality. And they've claimed that space because they always say, why don't you argue for a third space? Like, you can have a space for trans people. I tell you what, let's argue for a space for people who are so consumed with what other people's genitals are that they can't cope in the real world. Let's have a space for them. You know what it's called? Prison. If you're really that obsessed with what somebody's going to be doing in a toilet. Because honestly, I think there's something quite psychologically interesting about how it always comes down to toilets and changing rooms. Because obviously there's that sexual element, and sexualization and demonization go hand in hand. And also what also is true, especially with a lot of anti-trans accounts that look at images of trans women and try and humiliate them, is that repulsion is also partly attraction, because they're getting some endorphin rush out of looking at this stuff. They'll look at fetish images of trans people or cross-dressers and all this stuff, and they pretend to be repulsed by it. But actually, they're the ones collecting it and saving it to their phones. They're the ones that have created an account which is obsessed with it.
Yeah.
So if you want to look at psychology, if you want to look at the idea of repulsion also being attraction, and that idea of sexual fetishism, it's all in the GC accounts. That's where it exists. Very few trans people I know do that. They don't collect images of and put them on Twitter. They don't do that. I mean, I'm involved in a fetish scene, so I don't put anything particularly I would say X-rated, but I'm very positive, sex positive, and I like fetish imagery. I find it quite artistic, but the kind of images they're collecting are always kind of like try and humiliate somebody, I think. And there's a very sexual dimension to that, which is very worrying. That's what they did to me. It's like when they did that zoom in of my dress.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're doing it to try and humiliate me.
Yeah.
And they're also trying to make a grotesque image of me. But that's because is it because they feel threatened by me, or is it because they, upset? It's almost upset. Like there are a couple of accounts on Twitter that post about me every day.
Yeah.
Right. I did a video of me scrolling, and there's one account. I'm not going to mention the account's name, but every post, nearly every day, was a new picture of me. And I was thinking, this is what they do to Meghan Markle, the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Are these people crackpots or what? But it's really worrying, especially when you find out that somebody like that is going to your other accounts, like your Instagram and, TikTok. And I know somebody that actually had a look at my eBay purchase history.
Wow. Good Lord.
Because I posted something on Twitter from my eBay. I was selling something on eBay, and then somebody went and looked at my previous. It's like, fucking hell.
I was really struck by the hypocrisy of someone taking a photo, someone else zooming it, and them trying to say it's your problem for what you were wearing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, this is why I had a bit of a fallout with India Willoughby, because she did say, well, why did you wear that? What are you wearing that for at the IEA? I said, I don't give a toss where it is. And they were also saying, I drunk too much. Because there's a funny bit in the video where Peter Tatchell tells me to put the glass down.
Oh.
but honestly, I was in a very hostile space there. And when I got to the office, the first thing they did was offer me some wine. And I'm like, if anybody's offering me free wine, I'm taking the whole bottle. So, yeah.
Oh.
So I wasn't drunk, I was tipsy, yeah. But you can tell in the video that you can see the bottle going down as the video goes on. So like when I'm going to do my own reaction video. So what I'll do is I'll make a little graphic for the corner that shows the timer of the wine going down in the bottle. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's actually one other question we usually ask, and that is, if you could go back in time, what would you say to your younger pre-transition self?
Oh God, I'd probably say don't worry too much, because I was so anxious when you go into a teenage years, you get anxious, don't you, about everything. I remember sneaking out the house to go clubbing and stuff like that, and I used to put myself in all sorts of dangerous situations because I didn't tell people where I was going. I met strange men in car parks. Yeah. I was like, why am I... When I think about it now, I think, Christ, if anything had gone wrong, I probably never would have been found, because you take those kind of risks, don't you? And I was very socially anxious, so I'd probably tell myself just to chill out and probably do less drugs when I was young.
Good advice.
I remember going out clubbing in Manchester, and we just stay awake for like 24 hours. 24-hour party people.
Yeah. Rachel, did you have anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I don't think so. I mean, you haven't got a piano there, so you can't do a wonky piano rendition of Running Up That Hill.
No, well, it's in the shed, the piano. I got this. That's funny stuff. Well, I was at a charity shop with my mum, and I just started playing this piano, and the guy said, "Oh, do you want it?" And I thought he was joking. I said, no, I can't afford it. He goes, "Oh, it's worth 70 quid. And I was like, I thought about it, and I thought, well, I would again. He said, I'll deliver it for you for a tenner. Anyway, I didn't tell my mum. Anyway, they came with this piano, but it wouldn't fit through the front door. Anyway, so I thought, what am I going to do? So it's in the shed, but unfortunately, because it's damp, it's affected the mechanism, so I'm going to have to dry it all out so I can play it again.
Oh.
So I've been trying to learn a few new things on the piano. I used to play the piano a lot, but that Running Up That Hill theme, I thought I best learn. I wanted to learn that for a while. So
it was very well received. Looking at the comments, it was lovely.
Yeah. Did you see that on TikTok?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to do more TikToks. I do them in spurts. Like I just get the energy to do it, and then other times I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just doing a little bit of research. Unfortunately, I didn't make it round to your eBay history. If I'd had more time, I might have done.
Oh, it's just loads of rubber knickers and. I do worry about becoming more visible, but I feel like I've been through the worst of it already.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you go on all these programs, and we need a voice. This is the thing, because so often they have the trans debate without actually talking to a trans person.
Or they'll get Debbie Hayton in.
Yes.
Or somebody that just agrees with them anyway.
Yeah, Debbie Hayton, yeah. So it's definitely needed. And I'm guessing that most trans people won't do it because, I mean, I can see how it would be frustrating because they're just not open to listening.
Well, first of all, it's frightening to go on something like that and see your face on the TV or something like, because, nobody likes, I mean, unless you're absolutely perfect and beautiful and your hair's done perfectly, you're always going to be self-critical. But but even that, once you get over that, you're never ready for the hate that comes after because it's pernicious. It's like, oh my God. So I've kind of accepted that's going to happen because they're never going to run out of energy to do that. So, but that happens to anyone. That it's like, look, I mean, even big people, like even Gary Lineker, somebody like, all they have to do is say the wrong thing that doesn't fit the narrative, and people try and destroy their careers.
Yeah.
And all we said really is, oh, it's not fair, this is it, on the people that are drowning, or let's just have a bit of empathy. That's all he's basically saying. But even saying something as simple as that seems to, because he's a big, he's the kind of sporting hero, isn't he? That's why they find him threatening, because he can appeal to people that he's universal, on a universal level. Well,
yeah,
maybe that's how I should go. I should be more like Kirsty Allsop and be an every woman kind of sweet, cookie cooked kind of woman. And that's a massive freak that I am.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having the time and energy to come onto our show.
Oh, well, no, it's been a pleasure.
Really, it's been so interesting.
It's all ours.
If you ever want me to come back and pester you again, let me know.
Oh yes,
absolutely.
Please. Yes.
All right. Well.